The idea is that it would take more serious offenders, people who are rapists, murderers, kidnappers, your violent offenders off the street.
You might not want to necessarily target or pick on too much the person who's committing the crime of crossing the border illegally. They're doing it in most cases because they're looking for some type of work to help their family. So they're already a victim in this world. Most police departments that experience any real level of crime, they want to fight murder, violence, all those different things. And immigration laws are just so low on the totem pole.
The purpose as to why the program was implemented and the reality as to how it's being used is two different things.
Secure communities has affected me a lot because now I'm afraid to go out in the street. I'm afraid to have contact with the police, afraid that they stop me and that they ask me for something. I have been here for more than 20 years in North Carolina. Before, I lived in California. In California, I also was afraid to go into the street because I lived near the border. Here, I felt more secure. I felt free. But when all of this started, of requesting the license, I've had a lot of fear and I haven't wanted to go out.
Majority of people who get caught up in the Secure Communities program are low-level offenders. I think the latest statistic I saw was almost 80%, or maybe even more than 80% of people who are actually picked up and taken into, swept up through secure communities are not level 1 offenders.
I adopted America as my country. I consider myself more American than Mexican. This is my country. I can tell my kids that they shouldn't feel ashamed that we don't have papers because we pay taxes. We do everything that Americans with papers do. The only thing is that we don't have papers to show that I'm this, but I'm American, and that's what I think.
Perhaps there's many of people like me that have become advocates almost accidentally by nature of the fact that we see such a major injustice being done to people. I received a phone call one day from a woman. She called me crying that her daughter, she had a young daughter, her daughter had been raped. And she said, "What do I do?" She was speaking to me in Spanish, screaming, sobbing on the phone. And I said, "You have to call the police." We didn't have caller ID at our office, and she kept crying and she said, "Well, I'm undocumented and I'm a single mother, and if I call the police, what is going to happen? Are they going to find out about my status?" And I said, "You have to call the police." I just kept repeating that to her and telling her, you have to keep your community safe, you have to keep yourself safe, you have to keep your daughter safe, you need to call the police. And she said, "What if they put me in detention? What's going to happen to my daughter?" And at that moment, she hung up on me. I imagine in my head that this man, whoever it was, is still walking around our community doing this to other children because this woman who doesn't have a criminal record was too afraid to out this person.
The idea is, like I said, that it would make our communities more secure, but what we're seeing is that it's making our communities much less secure. I've had people who have been victims of horrible crimes. I had one young woman who had been raped in her place of employment and never reported the crime. Her manager knew about it because there were security cameras. There was evidence of a violent crime that happened. The employer fired him, and that was the extent of it. And that wasn't an isolated case. I've had several victims of very violent crimes that are afraid to report those crimes because of secure communities.
Local law enforcement and the community have to have trust. The Secure Communities program, like 287G before that, that creates a barrier and unnecessary trust issues that weren't there before. The many phone calls that I've received over the years of people desperate to find a family member that's being caught up, that's been picked up by ICE here locally, and they get moved very quickly and they can't find their loved one. That just in itself, to not know if your loved one was in a car accident in a ditch somewhere or has been moved to Georgia at a detention center, is just not necessary. I think it's interesting that is not a national outrage in this country, that people are losing their parental rights because they're in deportation.
The trauma, the fear of the parents going out to even participate or even driving, they can take the risk to go to work because they have to fed for get something for their family.
I believe there's right now about 5,000 children across the U.S. that are in foster care because their parents have been or are in deportation proceedings.
It's also really affected me a lot, because in my own family, because they deported my in-law. I cried so much every time that my sister talked about it. It was very, very hard. They sent my in-law to Mexico, and my sister had to choose to be with him or alone with their children, who were born in the U.S., and so she went to Mexico. But it was very, very sad.
Probably one of the worst things that I've seen is cases of young people that have been brought here to this country when they were young children, who are American as apple pie, and they are picked up by ICE and put in detention. You know, here's kids that should be trying to discover the cure for cancer, and they're sitting in a detention center making a profit for these for-profit immigration facilities.
We need to get out of the private prison business. I mean, this is all about money, and that's where I think a lot of our policies, unfortunately, are being driven by these corporate entities that have a financial interest in them and not really about our communities and about our safety.
It is required for there to be this arbitrary number of 34,000 people in detention at all times. So the pressure put on these ICE agents, unfortunately, their job performance is tied to the number of people that they pick up. That leaves everybody in the immigrant community very vulnerable. A lot of people have to be willing to give up this cash cow that this detention program is. I don't think realistically that that's going to happen anytime soon. And I don't have anything against anybody trying to make a profit, but the commodity here is human beings, and there is something really wrong with that.
We shouldn't be putting on ICE detainer on somebody who's productive member of the community. We should look at these folks as part of the community fabric, not people we should be deporting.
But what we're seeing is there's a lot of misinformation about when does that 48 hours start. We've had situations where the jail says, well, we haven't notified ICE, so it's 48 hours from the time we notify ICE. There's no authority to hold somebody. So it can be up to 5 days that the person can be held for ICE to come and pick them up. So you've got situations where people are staying in custody a lot longer than they normally would.
There are many cheaper ways to do that than to put a person in a detention center for several months. That is unnecessary. The only winner in that situation is the for-profit detention center that is housing these people.
Jurisdictions are not being reimbursed for that money. So you're talking about initially the 48 hours up to, it's up to 5 days that someone is being held, and that's at the county's expense. Situations where people are not posting their criminal bonds because they don't want to be transferred to immigration custody. And then, of course, if they violate and hold somebody beyond what's allowed by the statute, then they are subjecting the county, the jurisdiction, to liability.
I think that secure communities is costing our county a lot of money, because a lot of different jurisdictions from around the country, like in Miami and different areas, have basically stopped participating in this program because of the cost that's involved. Several people that I work with here in the community are trying to get local officials, elected officials, to look at this from a cost perspective and how this can be done in a way that, number one, it's not costing our community money, and also the unknown cost of having, for example, a rapist walking around our community.
And we want anyone whoever you are, if you've witnessed a crime like that, to feel 100% confident to come to us and say, I saw this. And we will never ask you, you don't speak English? Are you a citizen? Are you here legally? Oh, you're a criminal. We're going to lock you up. I always worry a little bit about the equal application of the law in different communities. One city could be applying it very, very well and effectively, and then another community could be using it to abuse certain communities.
Contacting your representatives, contact President Obama. I think one of the problems is this detention bed mandate. I mean, when you've got this mandate that says we have to have so many beds filled every night, then it's hard not to go after, non-criminals to meet that requirement.
The cities should focus more on making sure their citizens are secure. And I think the cities should also try to implement immigrant-friendly policies that will help immigrants, help the police.
The vast majority of immigrants that I come in contact with, they are humble people, they are law-abiding people, they care about their country, they care about this country, and they care about their community. They want to do the right thing. But there are a lot that are afraid. They see the police and they're afraid, they'll get, they run. Even though that they could be helpful to law enforcement, or they're victims of crimes, they're just afraid.